In setting up the VPN site-to-site tunnel between Firewall 1 at Site 1 and Firewall 2 at Site 2, let's take a look at our game plan. Let's begin in Smart Console by first enabling the IPsec feature on both Firewall 1 and Firewall 2. Once we've done that, let's create a brand new VPN community object, which is going to have all the details regarding who the gateways are that are going to peer with each other, and we'll add Firewall 1 and Firewall 2 to the new VPN community. Then third, we'll specify that as part of our VPN domain, the networks that are going to be protected and have the benefits of having this site-to-site VPN tunnel, let's add 192.168.1.0. That's the internal network at Site 1 on the left, and we'll also add 10.3.0.0, which is the inside network on the right, connected to Firewall 2. What I'd also like to do is we'll also verify that for Firewall 1 and Firewall 2, we'll verify that they're both using their interfaces connected to that 6783 network as the interface they should use to set up those peering relationships with each other. And our final step in the configuration is to edit our security policy to identify that we want to use that VPN community, and then more specifically which traffic we'd like to match that should be protected and sent over the VPN tunnel. So here on our admin PC, we'll go ahead and connect with Secure Console over to .110 and click Login. So our first step is to enable the IPsec feature on both of our gateways. So over here on the left-hand side in the navigator panes, we'll go ahead and click on Gateways and Servers. And here we have Firewall 1 and Firewall 2. We'll simply double-click on Firewall 1 to edit its properties. And here with the general property selected for Firewall 1, down under Network Security, we'll go ahead and put a check in the checkbox next to IPsec VPN, click OK, and then we'll repeat that process for Firewall 2. So we'll double-click on Firewall 2. Under General Properties, under the tab for Network Security, we'll put a check in the checkbox for IPsec VPN and click OK. Next, let's create a VPN community to identify the VPN gateways, in this case Firewall 1 and Firewall 2, that will be establishing VPN tunnels with each other. So to do that, we'll go ahead in the navigation over here on the left. We'll click on the Security Policies tab here. And on this left-hand side, under Access Tools, we have an option to look at or create VPN communities. So we'll click on VPN Communities. We have a couple that have been given to us by default. Let's create a brand new community, and we'll add Firewall 1 and Firewall 2 to it. So we'll click on the New icon. And then from the drop-down, we have two options. We have Star or Meshed. So if we select Star, it's going to give us the opportunity to create a new community object. So here we'd supply a name for this new object, and then we'd simply add the headquarters site or other central sites that are going to be at the middle of our star, and then we could have our branch office 1 and branch office 2 and other satellite locations that are going to be building tunnels. So at headquarters, any firewalls here would build VPN tunnels with every branch or every satellite gateway that was in this list. So the other option, besides creating a star topology for our VPNs, would be to go ahead and create a community that's based on a meshed. So if we click here on New Meshed Community, because every device is going to create a VPN tunnel with every other device, we simply add all our firewalls right here. So let's call this VPN community object our_VPN_com. And then for gateways, we'll click on the plus symbol. And let's add Firewall 1 and Firewall 2 to the list. And the other cool thing about this VPN community is we can not only identify who's going to be peering with each other, but we can also specify a lot of the details regarding the IPsec sessions right here. For example, if we click on encryption, we can specify the encryption methods we want to prefer. By default, it wants to use IKE version 1 for IPv4. And with IKE version 1, we've got two phases, phase 1, phase 2. So right here we can specify what we want the details to be regarding IKE phase 1 and IKE phase 2. And one of the beauties of having all these details as part of the VPN community object for the VPN peers is that we can define the properties here and it can apply to both of them. Or in the case of dozens of VPN gateways, all of them. And that way we don't have to remember what we did for the IKE phase 1 and IKE phase 2. It's consistent across the board by using our VPN communities. So I'm going to take all the defaults and click OK. So we've enabled IPsec for Firewall 1 and Firewall 2. We've created the new VPN community and included Firewall 1 and Firewall 2 in it. Next, let's go ahead and specify that instead of protecting all the traffic on the internal networks for Firewall 1 and Firewall 2, let's identify just two networks as part of our VPN domain. And that wode be the 192.168.1 network that's hanging off of Firewall 1 and the 10.3.0 network that's hanging off of Firewall 2. So to do that, we're going to go back in the navigation over here on the left, and we're going to click on the Gateways and Servers. we're going to go back in and modify the properties of firewall 1 and firewall 2 respectively to identify the VPN domains, the networks that we want to have protected. So we'll start with firewall 1. We'll double click on firewall 1 to bring up its properties. We'll click on network management. And here it's identifying Ethernet 1 as an external interface. And that's because we have a default route that's going out of this interface. And so as a result, it assumes everything else is an internal network, which means that by default, it would be protecting this traffic and this traffic as part of our VPN domain. If we want to change that, what we could do is simply expand the network management section here. And under network management, we'll simply click on VPN domain. And from here, instead of saying all IP addresses behind the gateway are considered part of the VPN domain, instead of that, we can click this radio button right here to manually define the VPN domain. And then from the pick list, we can go ahead and specify the networks we want to protect. So from firewall 1's perspective, the inside network, let me expand this column a little bit. The inside network object here of 192.168.1 is the VPN domain that we're going to protect from firewall 1's perspective. So we'll go ahead and select that and then click on OK. And then we'll go to firewall 2 and open up its properties. We'll expand network management, click on VPN domain, and we'll manually define it here. So from firewall 2's perspective, from the pick list, we are going to go ahead and choose the branch office, which is the 10.3 network. So we'll click that, click on OK. So now we've enabled IPsec on firewall 1 and firewall 2. We've created our VPN community and added firewall 1 and firewall 2 to it. We've also specified the 192.168.1 and 10.3.0 networks respectively as part of the VPN domain. Now, the other detail that I want to confirm is which interfaces are these firewalls going to use when they try to peer with each other. So we'd want to take another step and just make sure that the firewalls are using the correct interface for the connectivity when they build that VPN tunnel with their peers who are in the same VPN community. So to do that, we're going to go back to the properties of firewall 1. So we'll double click on firewall 1. And here on firewall 1 properties, if we go to IPsec and click on IPsec VPN, here it's showing us the VPN community that this gateway is a part of. And if we expand the IPsec VPN section and click on link selection right here, we can tell it specifically what interface we want to use for establishing the VPN tunnel. So instead of using the main address, let's go from the drop down and select the outside address on firewall 1, which is 67.83.0.111, and then we'll click on OK. And let's also do that on firewall 2 as well. So firewall 2 already shows the IP address of 67.83.0.112, so it'll use that one by default, but just to be consistent, let's go into the details of firewall 2. We'll expand IPsec, click on link selection under IPsec VPN, and then specify manually there the interface we want to use for the VPN tunnel, which is going to be 67.83.0.112. So with that selected, we'll click on OK. And let me go ahead and publish those changes. And then our last step is to modify our security policy to include that VPN community and to identify the traffic specifically that we want to be encrypted. So over here on the left-hand side, we'll click on the tab here for security policies. And then under access control, let's go ahead and click on policy. And I'm going to go ahead and click on the icon here to collapse all the sections. And let's make a new section just for VPN traffic. And let's put it at the very beginning. So I'm going to right-click the top section here and select New Section Title above the current selection. And let's call this VPN Site-to-Site. Press Enter. And then in this section, let's right-click and let's create a new rule below this section header. And let's call this VPN rule. So for the source and destination regarding this VPN traffic, let's use the plus symbol for source, and let's bring in the branch office, which is the 10.3 network, and also the inside network right here. So not the inside zone, but rather the inside network of 192.168.1. And we'll close the selection tool here, and we're going to use those same networks again for the destination. So effectively it says traffic to or from these two sites, these two networks, gets to be encrypted as far as this rule is concerned. And then if we want to limit it down and not just have all traffic between those sites, we could, for the services and applications, let's use something specific as a test. Let's do ICMP. So far what that means is any traffic between those two networks, if it's ICMP, we want the action to be to go ahead and allow that traffic. So we'll have for the action accept. And what's not showing here is a column for VPN. So I'm going to right click on this header. And from the drop down, let's click on the checkbox next to VPN so we can see that column. And here in this VPN column, let's right click and let's choose specific VPN community. and let's choose the community that we set up, which is our_VPN_com. So we'll select that. And let's also go ahead and track that as well. So in the track column, we'll hit the drop down, we'll select log. And if we scroll all the way over to the right, this is going to be installed by default on both Firewall 1 and Firewall 2, because it takes two to tango with a VPN tunnel. And we want this policy applied to both Firewall 1 and Firewall 2. So that looks great. So we'll click on Publish, and then we'll click on Install Policy, verify that both firewalls are selected, and click Install. And then we'll give that a minute or two to percolate, and once it's done, we'll test it. So in our policy, any traffic that's coming from devices on this network and going to this network, and vice versa, is going to be encrypted over the tunnel between Firewall 1 and Firewall 2. So as a test, here's what I propose. Let's do a ping from PC1 to 10.3.0. And I know for sure that E1 is up over here, which is .112, which is the E1 interface on the firewall. So we could actually ping 10.3.0.112, and that would match our traffic between the two networks, and that would cause that traffic to be encrypted and shipped over the site-to-site VPN tunnel. We can also use the option -n space and then like send 1,000 pings or 10,000 to keep traffic going back and forth. So when we look at the details for that VPN tunnel, we can actually see the counters incrementing regarding traffic that's being encrypted and shipped over the tunnel. So back here at our management PC, which is on the 192.168.1 network, let's go ahead and minimize Smart Console, and let's bring up a command prompt. One way of doing that is to right-click on the Windows icon, bottom left-hand corner, and click Command Prompt. So from here, let's do a ping space -n. We'll specify 10,000. We can always do a Control-C later to stop it. And let's ping that E1 interface over on Firewall 2 on the 10.3.0 network, which is at .112. So with that in place, we'll press Enter, and away it goes. Now, notice that first packet, how it took a long time. So while that's cooking, let's go ahead and let's bring back Smart Console. And in Smart Console, if we go over here on the left-hand side to Logs and Monitor, and give that a moment to refresh. And let me arrange these columns a little bit. Let's get rid of the source user just for a moment. So we'll hide that column. And let me expand these columns just a little bit so they're a little easier to read. So here we have some traffic from our management PC to that firewall's 10.3.0.112 interface address that was matched by rule number 1, which indicated that traffic needed to be encrypted. And that's being reported by Firewall 1. It also looks like we have the initial establishment of the VPN tunnel between Firewall 1 and Firewall 2. Check this out. Here we have IKE that's happening between Firewall 1 and Firewall 2. And that would also explain from our ping why that first ping took a few hundred milliseconds and then the rest went fairly quickly. Because in the background, the two VPN gateways were setting up the tunnels, which took a teeny bit of time. And then with the IPsec tunnel in place, Firewall 2 is now receiving that traffic and decrypting it. And also, while we're here on the Logs and Monitor tab, if we click on New Tab right here, so currently we're looking at the firewall log. If we click New Tab, here we have the option of using some additional monitoring tools, including Smart Monitor. So with New Tab selected, down here at the bottom under External Apps, if we click on Tunnel and User Monitoring right here, that'll open up Smart View Monitor. And then from here, there's several ways of looking at the VPN information as well. So under Gateway Status, if we click on VPNs right here on the left, so currently Firewall 2 is highlighted, so it's showing us the details for Firewall 2. So regarding Firewall 2, if we want to take a look at these details, we can simply click on the greater than symbol over here to the right of each of those items. So for IPsec, if we click on the greater than symbol, it's going to show us details regarding VPN tunnels on Firewall 2. So if we scroll down just a little bit, here it has the encrypted traffic, and that number is still increasing because we still have that ping in the background sending traffic between the two VPN domains, which is the 192.168.1 network on the left and the 10.3.0 network on the right. And we can use the navigation tools here as well to go back. And here under tunnels, we have several options. If we had multiple communities that we were using, we could click on Tunnels on Community, and then select the community that we want to look at and click on OK. And that'll show us that currently we have Firewall 1 and Firewall 2 who are both associated with this community and that tunnel is up. And if we double click on that, it can show us additional details regarding that tunnel. In this Nugget and hands-on lab, we've built and verified IPsec site-to-site VPNs in a checkpoint environment. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.